Christina, Raphael, looks like Quinn is here. Amazing. Well, we'll jump right in. We have a lot to cover in a little time. So I'm going to go ahead and just launch us into introductions here. I will be your moderator today. I get the high honor of being able to conduct and moderate this conversation between you all and our amazing Immerse product team. I'll start with introducing myself. My name is Daniel Decker. I am the Director of Community Engagement here at Immerse, which means I help to obviously direct the initiatives pertaining to customer support and engaging our community through some of our social platforms like Discord. So that's what I do here. I'm in cahoots and in conversation with a lot of the product team to understand our product more, communicate it well to our end user. But really, the stars of the show today are going to be Jacob, Furnari, Dylan, and Chris. But I'd love to allow them to introduce themselves in order of appearance here on this front slide. So Jacob, do you want to take the mic and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. Excited to chat a little bit about our process and the way that we work at Immerse. I'm our Chief Product Officer. Been at Immerse since day one, and it's been a wild ride, but I get the joy of working on our product and working really closely with our users to deliver value to them in a way that's innovative and also makes use of VR in a way that is pedagogically sound. And so we'll be talking a lot about that today. So I am super happy to be here, and that is me.
I'm really jealous of that intro. That was good. I'm Dylan, but I go by DK here. We have another Dylan who's on our VR side. And so I'm a product manager here. I typically work primarily with our virtual reality side of things, all of the engineers on that side. I get to get into all the data, the customer feedback, everything we hear from our members, partners, things like that, and distill that into projects that we are working on and delivery of those features, bug improvements, whatever it is, directly to our members at the end of our product cycles, which we'll be talking more about today as well.
And I am Chris Guess. I'm our lead 3D artist, and I take their beautiful words and I articulate them into visuals in the 3D side, but also a little bit on the 2D side as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, gentlemen. It's great to have you on this call. I'm excited to jump right into these questions. We're gonna get going, and I want to make sure that everyone can see my screen okay. We are on our first question here. We'd love to do what we can to save time for Q&A at the end. We might go over a few minutes. Bear with us. If you have questions, please add them in the chat. We'll be able to save those till the end. But our first question today, I'd love to maybe tee up DK for answering. And it is, can you, DK, provide to us an overview of the collaborative process between the product and education teams here at Immerse when creating these VR learning experiences?
Absolutely. And I will do my best to practice being concise. But obviously, with an app where our primary goal is building human connection and developing fluency for all of our members, it is critically valuable and important to us that our product side and our education side are in lockstep with everything we do. And Daniel, maybe you can go to the next slide here and show a quick little Venn diagram I put together for this. It's really basic, but really on the product side, we're the ones that are into the technical constraints, our data insights and implementation, and education handles a lot of that customer feedback, the pedagogy, and the experience. And then both of us are really pulling in the research, the trend analysis, the empiricism, and the networking to help define what it is we're going to be working on together. So very practically, this looks like regular meetings between our product team members and our education team members. It's also really fun when we do testing, our quality assurance portions of product releases. We have our guides and our education members in there with us, making sure that what we're building is pedagogically sound, that it fits the use cases that they know our members are using on their path to fluency, that it fits the best ways in which our guides are teaching that path to fluency. So there's a lot of that lockstep to make sure we are building things that truly provide value to our guides to be able to teach or to our members to be able to get to that path to fluency, which I'll probably say 50 more times by the end of this. But yeah, all that to say, we're in deep lockstep together in that process.
So good. So good. Thank you, DK. Amazing, concise. Our next question here is maybe one for Jacob. Jacob, I'd love for you to talk us through the journey of an idea from its initial ideation and all the way to its release in the Immerse product. I'm going to just go ahead and go to this diagram for you, as you'll probably be using that one.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to. This diagram looks neat and concise, but the reality is it's a much more messy process. This is definitely more aspirational than it is real. But this, I think, is a very concise representation of how we try to do product at Immerse. and how an idea makes its way into the product. So everything really starts with an outcome. You see that at the top of the tree there, whether that's a business outcome or an education outcome, or oftentimes they're the same thing. There's always an outcome we're trying to drive. And that's where everything begins. Without that North Star, it's really, there's no kind of core direction on what direction we should build. So everything starts with that outcome. And then from those outcomes are opportunities. And so opportunities you can think of as a need, a pain point, or a desire of our users. So as we do user research, which we'll talk about in a little bit, interviews, things to uncover opportunities, needs, pain points, and desires that we believe will move a specific outcome forward. So that's kind of how the tree flows. Then once we have an opportunity that we want to focus on and we have reason to believe it's going to move our outcome, then we start solutioning. We start thinking through solutions. Oftentimes there'll be different iterations, different versions of solutions that we can kind of compare and contrast. And then once we decide on a solution that we want to move forward with, then we have, I articulate them here as assumption tests. And really this can be anything from as large as a sort of an A/B test where we put it out into production and we test it, which is a new practice for us that we're getting underway, which takes a little bit more time and effort to really validate something. Or if it's something that's less risky, something we feel better about, we can validate our assumptions or test our assumptions with just something small. Maybe that's even just a conversation or a quick survey or anything that can help de-risk what we're about to do to a point at which we feel comfortable rolling it out into the product. So this is kind of like a general overview of how something goes from an opportunity that we believe is going to drive an outcome forward all the way down to a solution that we end up rolling into the product. And after these assumption tests, no matter how big or small they might be, that's when we feel like, okay, it's time to fully design this out, build it out in the product, and roll it out to our users. And those assumption tests, like I said, range from very small to sometimes quite large, actually working with users in production or in beta builds. So there's a lot of different ways that we do that, but an idea generally flows through this process, although this does make it look a lot more clean and tidy than it often is.
Yeah, well said. I'd love to ask Chris, as an idea goes from concept to creation, we realize that you're a part of like that creative process, visualizing and turning into an immersive experience, that idea. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I have some media here to share, how that enters into your domain, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it trickles down quite nicely when it's articulated like that. But usually, with the opportunity that's presented, in this particular case, on the top left is a redesign for the home space where you first enter into Immerse and what you are looking at. We started from a large home space that you had to move around and it had a little bit of confusion there. And we wanted to invite people in. And so it started with just mocking up what are the ideas here? Like there's a big UI screen, a big portal, which then translates to the bottom left, which is what does the space look like? What does it feel like? Does the user need to walk around? But really just drawing different ideas, taking all the ideation and the words and then translating that into something that visually makes sense and enters into the opportunities that we uncovered.
I feel like I have to give a shout out here because we'll be in meetings for brainstorming and Chris will be drawing these things on the side. And after like a 10-minute meeting, he'll be like, I got it. I mocked it up. And it's amazing to be a part of his creative process while the rest of us are just talking back and forth. It's really cool.
I feel like my brain just works completely different. They're like shooting off words and different ideas, and my brain is just totally shapes, colors, and bubbles.
That's awesome.
Maybe that I think would be helpful to call out that I'll try to squeeze in quickly is Chris mentioned it, but that top left, we had a version of that home space that was much larger. Chris mentioned confusing. So that was an opportunity that we uncovered via user interviews, different ways that we get those insights from what's challenging. So need, pain point, or desire, those are opportunities. So we recognized a pain point that was causing things like struggles to get to class, struggles finding things. And so that's kind of an opportunity that we uncovered that then began this solutioning process that you see here, where it starts with something maybe a little bit more low fidelity. We go through a lot of meetings and conversations to get to a point where, on the bottom left, Chris was mentioning really talking about the aesthetic and the look and feel of the space. So hopefully that provides kind of an example as well of how something went from an opportunity down to a solution that we then rolled out into the product.
And to affirm the solution, a lot of the testing, but also on the support side where I live, we got to see a massive decline in people having issues making it into class, navigating what was that initial space and what is now this new space. So definitely made a huge improvement. It's always fun to be in that scene and look at these drawings and see how it really did go from his brain to the paper to the product so cleanly. So we got more questions. I love how quickly we're moving. This is excellent. The next is, how do we really prioritize those feature requests that come in for VR experiences within the Immerse product roadmap?
Yeah, I can speak to this one, and you can go to the next slide as well. I put together a very simple visual here. And similar to what Jacob said, this is a heavily simplified version of, I think, a lot of the very appropriate messiness of deciding what feature requests actually gets pushed into the product. And Jake, I'll probably pass it over to you at the end of this for an example that you may be able to give. But I'll also say that, this flow is in no particular order. Honestly, just put it in an order because it looked pretty to be in a funnel shape. But to go through each of these steps, when we get feature requests, which come from all over the place, it could be a guide in our lessons that hear it from a member that then gets given to us. It could be a note on a Meta Quest, or sorry, the Meta App Store review. It could be a note on our Discord. I mean, we receive them all over. So we're constantly seeing them and tracking them and trying to put them through these layers. And just to start at the top here and kind of go down, showing you the value of each. Business objectives. This is very, very broad, obviously, but I think it's really important for us to always consider a feature request and how it relates to our mission, how it relates to the North Star that Immerse is always pursuing. We are trying to pursue human connection and a very tangible, delightful product to give someone a path to fluency. And does this feature request equip that in some way? Does it equip our guides, our members? Does it do something to provide that level of value to our members? And then there's education. Obviously, as I mentioned before, they are the masters in pedagogy. They know what gets someone to fluency. We are not, which is why we're so thankful we can do this collaborative work with them, where they are the ones looking at this and saying, okay, yes, this feature will support someone's path to fluency. This will support our ability to teach or guide them or whatever it is in our product. And then there's feasibility. And I think this really lands on our VR engineers. And this is just the technical feasibility of something. We have ideas left and right that are so exciting. I want to learn language inside a mall, inside a huge world. It's like, okay, we have limitations on the size of a scene we can make just because of the hardware that our application is running on. We can't do these massive worlds because of limitations of hardware, things like that. So we have to assess the feasibility of things like that. And then obviously delight. We are a company that pursues that human connection and fluency of a language that you're pursuing, but we want to do it in a fun way. We don't want to be a boring classroom. We don't want it to be just another learning opportunity that you can see left, right, and center. We want it to be delightful. We want it to be fun, which is why we have things like bow and arrows that help you practice, vocabulary, why we have bright colors and leaves blowing in the wind. There's just these delight factors that we want to add that make it wonderful. So that by no means is it the last step, but a significant step is making sure that feature request or whatever it is we're deciding for that final thing that gets into our production environment is something that can add delight to our members. So it's a very brief overview, but hopefully that makes sense. Jacob, I'll pass it over to you. I don't know if you've got an example you can discuss for that. Oh, you're muted or your audio's gone.
I'm muted.
Classic. There you
go. Please tell me I'm not the first one that's happened to during this conference. I was just, yeah, that was a helpful overview. I think examples are helpful. And so one that I'll give is, it's actually something that hasn't gone into the product, but a feature request that we want to include is everything related to community features and social features and how we might include product features that make it easier for members to connect outside of class. There's still a lot of more sort of ideation to go on that, but it's been a request for quite some time, friending features and, I want to be able to friend somebody and I want to be able to join a specific community. So all these very specific kind of solution focused feature requests that folks are making that all really do point toward, like DK was mentioning, a lot of our business objectives, kind of the future vision that we're moving toward, but they aren't feasible at this stage because we're still really trying to build a really solid learning experience in a number of different ways. There's gaps that we're trying to fill. And so it becomes then more of a prioritization discussion. So as things pass through these filters, it's not necessarily like if it doesn't pass, it's a never. It kind of these are filters that help us prioritize when something might get done as well. And community features are an example of that, that have been requested quite a bit. and that we definitely want to move on, but it's just a matter of where we've had to prioritize that given our current product roadmap.
Well said. I don't know who originally submitted the feature request for bow and arrow vocab practice, but I'm really glad they did because it really was one of the most delightful things I've done in Immerse. The next question that we have here is, what are the specific methods or strategies that we're talking about here that we do or that we use to gather and incorporate the user feedback into the design and development process, into this tree that we're sort of looking at?
I was muted again.
Uh-oh. I saw him talk. Uh-oh.
So I'll use this called an opportunity solution tree. Shout out to Teresa Torres. She's kind of a product thinker that we pull from a lot and try to incorporate her thinking. So this is not an original thought the way this is laid out, but it's really helpful for visualizing this oftentimes roundabout crazy process. And it is very helpful also for me to call out where a lot of the research and user feedback kind of fits in this process. So we do things like surveying our users. We do a lot of one-on-one interviews, group Q&A, which we've just recently started doing inside of our spaces, beta testing with our guides, beta testing with our users, beta testing internally with our team members. And then we have lots of feedback forms. So at the end of every lesson, for example, there's a feedback form that pops up where our users can submit feedback on that lesson. And there are other avenues where they can submit more general feedback as well. And all of that feeds into what we call the opportunity space. So as we're thinking about outcomes that we want to drive, we're really doing all these research efforts to uncover opportunities that we then can build solutions for. And so those opportunities, like I mentioned, are needs, pain points, desires. These are the things that naturally come up when you're talking to a user. And then we hear these trends over and over again, right? Like, okay, here's a thing that has shown up in multiple user interviews and surveys and QA, whatever it might be. And we can start to hone in on a specific opportunity, need, pain point, or desire that we think if we address this with the right solution, it should move our business forward. It should move that top level outcome in some way. And so that's the way we sort of incorporate research. And those are some of the activities that we do to do that. Surveys, one-on-one interviews, group Q&A, which has been really fun as we've launched that in the actual product. We'll meet in some of our spaces, and namely members of our design team have been doing an amazing job with that. And then beta testing is very common with our guides, especially. As you can imagine, their feedback on features and ensuring that they work with the class environment and they work with their flows, authoring and delivering lessons, all super important. And we do all of that in advance of oftentimes rolling that out into the product. So those are just a handful of ways we incorporate research and feedback. And just to give you a picture of where they fit in our process, that opportunity space that you see on this diagram is where a lot of that lives. And that's how we uncover what to start solutioning on.
Well said. Anything to add there, DK or Chris? I like that we have the type of product that we can remotely, virtually gather people together in the same virtual room to be able to have conversations about the product that we're embodied in. Those product QA and beta builds that we've done, or we engage with our audience in real time in our platform, have been so cool to either be a part of or watch. So awesome. We got a couple more here. The next is, I'd love to hear what some of the challenges or obstacles that we have encountered during the creation and release of these learning experiences and how we've addressed them.
I think I can pick that ball up. I feel like piggybacking off of what Jacob just talked about, as soon as you begin creating new scenes or creating experiences that go into the VR, you enter a whole new suite of problems. How many people are going to be in the room? Are they going to be moving around? Does it require a lot of active engagement amongst themselves? Do we want to limit the space that they are walking in? And then once you begin thinking about that, you encounter things like Z fighting or strange errors in 3D that you have to overcome. I think specifically we did, I think there's a slide on the kitchen where I think it's the next slide, where our users were experiencing a bit of motion sickness due to the lighting. And just by changing the lighting in the scene, we're able to reduce the motion sickness. And a second ago, I talked about Z fighting, and what that is this flickering that happens in your screen that is incredibly distracting, but you're not able to pick it out until you get into a scene, and a lot of technical issues come about that you just aren't aware of if you're just enjoying a scene, but that we have to take into account. But I think if you go back one more scene, one more slide, sorry, uh, going back to our home space, that presented a whole different suite of problems where when a user enters the scene, they need to have a view of a huge suite of user interfaces. We wanted the learning journey on the floor to be persistent all the time so that at any point a user could look down and kind of get a glance at where they're at. But with this wealth of information, how do I place this in a room that makes sense, that's not overwhelming to the user, where it's not distracting, but still beautiful? So that's where you get these sketches where I'm just iterating and trying to problem solve before things ever get put into 3D, before it ever gets put into the game engine, before it ever gets released. We go through all of these rounds of changes to try to combat any of these anticipated like hangups that we feel like may happen.
One of
Well
my
said.
one of my favorite like discussion points that happens when we're, building scenes or objects is, some of you may know, in 3D, a lot of this is built just by a ton of polygons, right? It's polygons that are shaped to form objects and walls, and that's all it really is, right? And the more polygons you have, maybe the smoother a round object may look, and the less polygons you have, the more squared off it may look. And it's always funny to me, being on the non-technical side, I'm not the one building it, but hearing, the implementation of a new tree and a scene of like, there's too many polygons on this tree, or like, oh, we can add more polygons and make this look more realistic. And it's such a funny way to build out and talk about this world where we're talking so specifically about the amount of polygons that exist in these spaces and the performance effects that has on like your headset that's being used. And we have to stay under a certain polygon count to make sure, your display isn't stuttering, but it still looks beautiful to be in. And yeah, so many little trade-offs that are made between particularly Chris and a lot of our engineers that really lands on these beautiful things you see here.
That's actually what the trade-off discussion is something I wanted to bring up is, oftentimes we'll ship a solution and it'll get into production, and the trade-offs that we had to make, not even necessarily on the design or technical side, but just the solution in general, with the homeroom Chris shared. We made an update to the homeroom, we shipped it, and we did have to make a lot of trade-offs, and there's cost benefit analysis, and there's certain things that are great about the new homeroom, or not great about the new homeroom that were better about the old one, but it was the right choice to design it in this manner because the scales tipped in favor of all the benefit of doing this versus not. And so oftentimes that is what product development is, right? We're always iterating, always trying to improve, and we have to make trade-off decisions based on the season that we're in as a product, that we always try to come back around and then revisit. So, there is oftentimes things that happen in the product that we'll revisit in months or not often weeks, but months or maybe years, that we do have to think about redesigning or updating because the business is fluid, and there are new trade-offs that we don't have to make, that we maybe did have to make in the previous season. And so I also wanted to call out like that messy process is something that sometimes when we ship a solution and it's validated, there are still things that aren't perfect about it. And that's just kind of the nature of it. Sometimes it's challenging, but you get used to sort of always feeling like this solves the problem, but it could probably solve the problem better in a different season, or there are ways we can revisit it in the future. But if we want to get this out, ship this value quickly to our members, here are the trade-offs we need to make. You just make those trade-off decisions, and that's kind of the nature of the beast, but it is exciting.
You made me think of by having these trade-offs, I now have this amazing folder on my computer that I call the graveyard of beautiful designs. And it is just filled with amazing things that I've done that never see the light of day again. So you gotta hold it loosely, and ultimately at the end of the day, it's what is going to serve our users, our learners, the best.
You'll be able to sell that one day, Chris.
Yeah, I was gonna say, keep it under lock and key. Awesome. Well, everyone, I know we're at, I think the official time of our session has come and gone. We would love to stay on for maybe the next like 3 minutes until the top of the hour. We have one question in mind. We'd love to hear if that would be something you'd want to discuss. I know that we also have a couple questions that have come in during this session, but We enjoyed being able to speak with you up until this point. If you have to jump, please do. If not, I don't know. What do you think, folks? I think this will actually address a couple of the questions that have come up in the chat. So maybe we spend the next like 2 minutes discussing this, and it's our team, our product team, sharing some of the examples of successful VR learning experiences that have been really well received by our users, our end users, and discuss sort of what made them immersive, effective, delightful.
Cool. I can jump on this one. I'll try to make it brief as well. Yeah, we, again, on the product side, we were into the data a lot. So yeah, Danny, you can go to the next slide and I'll kind of show something, an example. Something that we're very aware of as a language learning app is what's called foreign language anxiety, or abbreviated to FLA. And FLA is something that really impacts a lot of new learners, right? They're nervous about how they sound, their pronunciation, the words, the new noises they have to make with their mouth, right? There's a lot of newness to it, and doing that in front of other people can be scary. So one of the things we care deeply about is how can we make it not scary? How can we make people feel comfortable and safe? Part of that is how we build our community, which I think is phenomenally done, but a part of that is just feature sets. And so something we introduced recently was our AI-powered avatars, which are these avatars that look like people, obviously not people, but you can go up to them and have a conversation with them. You can speak to them, and we encourage that speaking, and then they will speak back to you in that target language that you're learning. And this top graph here really shows the adoption of that feature since we launched it. And you can see that upward trend that we continue to watch people use and find continual value in going to these avatars to practice speaking that language so that they can build that confidence and comfort when they actually go into class and really apply it with real people in front of other people, with their guides, with their friends, with their family, whatever it is. So it's one of those little milestones we can add that we've seen a lot of value when mitigating foreign language anxiety. And for us, it's a feature we've seen a lot of success in that we want to continue to lean into. And then I'll touch on this last one briefly. The second chart down here is really us analyzing what actions do people take that lend or trend them to staying in Immerse, that what are the things they're doing that find so much value that keeps them around. And the number one thing, to probably no surprise, is someone joining one of our live lessons. Our live lessons are the bread and butter of Immerse. Our guides are absolutely amazing. These classes are so expertly led, and we continue to see that once someone joins that, they get it. They see, okay, I understand why Immerse is so powerful. I understand why this is the optimal path to fluency. So for us, when we see that valuable, I say feature, but it's really it's a significant core offering of our app. When we see that they're finding value in that, we lean heavily into that, and we track that data and continue to find ways to optimize, enhance, make it delightful, whatever it is, because we see that that's the thing that is so successful and so valuable for our members.
Amazing. Thank you so much, TK. Thank you so much, product team. I know we're on the top of the hour here. I want to be respectful of everyone's time and the next session. There were more questions, and there's obviously always more to be said of our product, but really grateful for what we covered today and for everyone's curiosity and for listening in. Until next time, see you in Immerse.
See everybody. Thank you so much for your time. Nice talking to you.
I'll jump in really quick just to let everyone know we are going to have a 15-minute break, and then we'll be joining back on this same Zoom link. So we'll see you all there.
Thanks again, everyone. Take care.